Succession has come to an end. I did the midway check-in, now I am giving my full thoughts on the season, the series as a whole. Spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen the show, get out of here. First, I'm going to talk about the season, because I could talk about how much I love the ending and the show as a whole, but everyone else is doing that, so I might as well talk about the season, because that's probably where I contribute most to the conversation. To get the score out of the way, I would give Succession Season 4 anywhere from an 8.8 to a 9 out of 10. I think it's going to end up as a 9 out of 10 in my head. It's just that right now, I'm keeping that range open because I'm a little cooler on the season just because I'm kind of tired of it. And this is going to make me sound like I didn't enjoy the season, but I am very happy this series is over because I don't think it could have sustained itself any longer and maintained its quality in its given state. What I mean by that is, for Succession to continue and maintain its level of quality, it would have really had to stop with the Kendall, Shiv, and Roman backstabbing frenzy. My biggest gripe with Season 4 is that the show kind of had the well run dry when it came to making that interaction riveting, and that was the interaction that defined so much of the season. Like I said during the midpoint check-in, I cannot disagree more with the assessment that the death of Logan Roy quote-unquote revitalized the show and made it stop spinning its wheels. The usual Kendall, Roman, Shiv backstabbing and politicking had been done in prior seasons and done better than it was here. I thought that was why Kendall was sort of removed from the family in Season 3, so episodes where they were together, like his birthday episode, didn't feel tired. The core trio were an ever-present part of each other's lives in this season, despite the fact that, in my eyes, their unsteady relationship with each other had been largely played out before this season. I am not against Logan's death as a story beat that resets the show, but in my opinion, the reset that so many people were clamoring for happened at the end of Season 3. The first two episodes of this season felt fresh to me, not because the Roy Rebel Alliance was made of unbreakable steel and it was never going to dissolve, but because the fissures between these kids, the seeds of betrayal that were already being planted, felt so much less pronounced. Just them functioning, just the appearance that they were going to function as a cohesive unit against the Tom and Logan duo, that felt novel to me. It had an excitement factor to it that the Roy boys versus Shiv the Shiv didn't. For that reason, I felt like many of the scenes in Season 4 were reiterative or simply repeating other parts of the series. The show, for me, lost some of its novelty. By being so introspective on the three kids and positioning Matsson as such a main player, as opposed to the old guard or Tom and Greg, who I find much more interesting, the show lost some of its allure. This may sound crazy to some people, but I truthfully found more enjoyment out of the first seasons of Poker Face, The Bear, and even, yes, House of the Dragon than this season of Succession. This is partially because they're in their first season and there's a newness factor to them, but I think it's also because, besides from who dies and who comes out on top, I don't think I was really getting surprised in any way by this season of Succession. I don't think it was particularly delighting me in a new way in any given stretch of episodes. The stronger narrative choice was there in Episode 3, when Frank makes a power play to get his name and the old guard's names on that piece of paper regarding Logan's death. To have all the non-Roys at the top of the power structure of Waystar Royco, the old guard, Caroline and Hugo, Tom and Greg, to have them as kind of the foil of this season for which the three kids are going against, to have them in some capacity replace Matsson as the quote-unquote main antagonist of the season, to me was much more interesting than what we got. For Matsson to play such a prominent role in this season, it's puzzling to me considering Armstrong kind of reverts back to the core trio of kids despite teasing a bigger role for Connor at the end of Season 3, and yet Matsson, who's introduced at the end of Season 3, Armstrong really tries to get into his head despite the old guard and Tom and Greg, much of them being there from the very beginning. Matsson had his bright spots, especially in Episode 5. Pretty much every interaction he has with the Roy children are golden, but after that, it felt like he was kind of a factor that made the show more vanilla than it needed to be. Him being the center of the universe in Episode 7, it just kind of took away from all the special interactions we could have had with Jerry and Carl, with Tom, with all these other characters I quite frankly needed to see more of. And then you simply have a stinker in Episode 8 where Kendall, Roman, and Shiv duke it out for an entire hour over what happened in Wisconsin and whether or not we should decide to go with Mencken. It's not tense to me. It's not riveting TV. It's an episode that condenses the show's multi-dimensional view on politics into a simple axis of good and bad, but more insultingly, honestly, it just ignores the subtler, the finer points of the show that are super interesting in favor of one central question that's not even that important for the rest of the show: whether or not Mencken gets in. These issues didn't sabotage the season or the show for me. I just want to bring them up because I don't think a lot of people are, and I simply do not believe this was the masterpiece seasons that 2 and 3 were. What did I love about this season? Some of the obvious stuff, like the Shiv and Tom argument at the end of episode 7, but then you got something like episode 6, which I really think is being overlooked. To me, this is one of the top 10 episodes the show has to offer. This episode slaps. It is firing on all cylinders. All of the elements of the show are working in perfect harmony. The dramatic interactions have just the right amount of novelty to them that I think was kind of lacking in some of the other episodes in this season. The show reminds you how funny it can be here. There is a perfect marriage of Scafaria's direction and Bertel's score, especially in that final collage, one of the most moving moments I've ever seen on TV. And the Public Enemy needle drop, by that point you know the episode can do no wrong. The episode is also so smart because it only has Kendall, Shiv, and Roman in a room together or otherwise plotting against each other once. And it matters. It's Shiv confronting them about the sabotage of the Gojo deal, and she's talking to them about how when they were younger, the brothers used to frame her for their misbehaving. And it's like, wow, that doesn't dramatically change who they are to each other. It doesn't totally upheave their dynamic. But we're getting a new piece of that dynamic. We're getting a fresh piece of information that you didn't think was really explored fully in the previous seasons. And you wouldn't have got that idea of Kendall and Roman kind of always being against Shiv and her kind of thinking it was always her against them if not for this scene. Those are the types of interactions you want from a final season of a TV show, where you have these characters, they've been together a lot, but the exchanges they have, it's not like the show is playing the same tune again, but also it doesn't feel like what these characters mean to each other, it's not like that meaning is being totally reinvented. And then the characters go on their separate paths and they're all really interesting. Roman is trying to emulate his father, but in the process of doing so destroys his relationship with Jerry. Shiv finds out that Tom is a lot more like her and her father than she ever imagined, and that makes her a lot more attracted to Tom. And Kendall is trying to glorify his father in a sense on that stage, but is also trying to put the memory of him to rest so he can become not just the number one boy in his father's eyes, but the number one boy of Waystar Royco itself. It feels like seasons 2 and 3 were operating at that level of brilliance and originality for the duration of the season. I can't say the same for season 4, even though it really stands out in episodes like episodes 4 and 6. But then Succession is at the peak of its powers yet again in episodes 9 and 10, and it reminds you there is a case against sticking the landing that, yeah, a kind of sloppy one may not sabotage the image of a show, but let me tell you, a great landing for a season or a series, it doesn't matter. A great ending can really elevate a body of work, and that's what happens. The ending of this season brings season 4 to a whole new level. The last 2.5 hours of this show are so enrapturing that you're not thinking about any individual quality of the show anymore. You're not thinking about the machinations of the show. You're not thinking about the quality of the production design or the quality of the directorial choices, even though they are very, very high. The point is that they're so high that you're fully immersed in the world. You're so captivated that you're just kind of swimming around in all these characters' heads that it's not even worthwhile for anyone to talk about the attributes. That would be a disservice to the show. All you would really want to talk about is what a video essayist was talk about, which is just what's going through these characters' heads, because there's so much complexity, so much density to these last 2 episodes. I mean, some of these exchanges, the Shiv, Carl, and Frank one is so genius, and it's right before another genius exchange between Kendall and Hugo. I love the Shiv, Carl, and Frank one because she asks them what they thought of her father as a person, and they say he was all right, like he was a bastard, but he had his good moments, and most importantly, he made them money. He was their boss. He served a limited role in their lives, and because of that, they can make sense of him. He's not a mystery to them. But to Shiv, he didn't fulfill his purpose in her life, and because of that, she's horrified by what they say. She can't possibly think of her father than anything else than a god or an entire world, like she says in her eulogy. And because of that, she can't justify anything of what he did. You follow that up with an exchange between Kendall and Hugo, where Armstrong is reaching out and telling us what the show is truly focused on. Kendall says it best: the people who love you also fuck you. This is an explicit plan to fuck the deal, me rule the world. If that's not what Succession is about, I don't know what it is about. It is about how the people closest to you can hurt you the most profoundly. And in terms of Kendall here, he is using his rationalization of the world to burn everything down, to destroy everything in his path, because the only thing that's real to him is the crown that will be atop his head. It's like, damn, that's deep. There's a lot to unpack right there, but the show presses on. Kendall says to Hugo, listen, if you come with me, this will not be a collaboration. You will be my dog, but the scraps from the table will be millions. And that, to me, is the show's statement on capitalism, where at this level of wealth, it doesn't matter who you betray, who you serve, what values you have. There is so much money that the money, in Jerry's words, will simply wash you away. Your sins, your shortcomings won't matter because the money justifies all of it. There is a reason the show is called The Godfather of its time, because like those great works of art in the 70s, this is a show that respects the viewer's intelligence enough to bombard them with ideas, to not waste a second developing nuance, because the showrunner knows you're not just watching this for entertainment, you're also watching this to think about it. And you're also watching this to get hurt, because that's really what happens in the season finale. The finale is so powerful and hurtful at the same time. It shows you this vision of the future where the Roys can finally work together, where they can love and support each other. And it seems so wonderful. And then they take that vision, put it to the flame, and burn it in front of your eyes. Shiv's boardroom betrayal will go down as one of the finest moments in the show's run. It is a moment that is so rewatchable because of how excellent the performances are, how excellent the writing is. But it's hard to go back every single time because of the hurt you feel, that these kids, that Shiv would rather live in the world created by her backstabbing husband than by her own brother. The betrayal is so powerful, it's so deep in a way, but also very pity and shallow. You look at Sarah Snook at one point during her masterstroke of a performance, and she smiles at Kendall like the way a sibling would when they're winning an argument against a sibling, when they're frustrating their sibling, or when they have the upper hand. And it echoes back to when Logan said they're not serious people. They're not. They, and this has been said before in other reviews, but they are the children playing outside when the adults are doing work. They don't understand the consequences, the magnitude of their actions, and really, the only pleasure they get, the only thing that's meaningful to them, is the hurt they extract from beating their siblings at something. However, it's not as if Shiv triumphs over Kendall here. She permanently sabotages any chance the kids had at true happiness. She permanently defeats all of them. It is over. If the kids decided to rid themselves of Waystar Royco as a unit, or if two of them decided to bite the bullet and back one of the kids, I am sure there would have been tinges of regret, but I think they would have lived in some comfort knowing that they decided to work together as a family. But when she decides to betray Kendall, when she decides to sell off Waystar Royco, they are all doomed to their own limbo because they're fractured, and it's a split that can never be put back together. As the show closes with Kendall being guarded off from the water, a symbol of either rebirth or death for him, he knows he can do neither of those things now. He can't die, he no longer has it in him to take his own life, but he also knows he cannot be cleansed of this moment. The way things transpired, he will be forever stained by what happened, and the other siblings will be as well. It's an ending that breaks your heart but feels so just for three characters who couldn't bear to see any of their siblings win over them, who would rather destroy any chance they have in happiness than to just let someone else they're bound to by blood win. It was a superb finale that elevated an imperfect but pretty damn great season of TV. And as for the series as a whole, I mean, even before the season aired, it was a top 10 show of all time. And now with this ending, Succession has only solidified its place among the greats. It's one of the great works of art of the 21st century, and it's just challenging to call it anything other than a masterpiece.